Page 166. Even if their will for freedom is flattened and exists only in wishes, it is still present and makes itself noticeable here and there. All submissiveness into the given and drawn-up unlogical laws of your humankind and its divided peoples bear no fruit, because the will for freedom is stronger, for it rests in the conscience that asks for freedom. All earthly peoples have entangled themselves in the meshes of their own laws, through which the insecurity in the peoples themselves could reach a breakthrough. Through this insecurity within the individual peoples themselves, the trust between the individual peoples was affected and destroyed. Envy and disfavor in respect to the material values of the peoples did yet something further for the undermining of all understanding, while the immoderate human greed for might still destroyed the rest and made an understanding completely impossible. How much have you earth human beings already written about these things, and how much printing ink, paper, effort, and sweat have you wasted with it senselessly, because everything was probably recognized rightly by individual human beings, but not purposefully further spread. Becoming soft in their entire manner, they brought their cognitions to the public with soft and humane words. The result was ridiculousness and falsifications and many other factors which could not lead to any fruit. If the truth had been purposefully spoken in harsh and appropriate words, then they would have offered absolutely no fronts for possibilities of attack for ridiculousness and falsifications, because through harsh words an aggression arises which forces a discussion during which the necessary facts can be called by name. Soft and sparkling words, however, do not lead to the appropriate, purposive, and logically equalized aggression, because they are only dismissed as ridiculous or falsified. According to the guideline of soft and sparkling words, it is senseless for the human beings when they ask where the rescuing way is to be found, and what must be undertaken against all the growing terrible things. This question is actually then only justified if the earth human being is willing to acknowledge the harsh truth in harsh words and to bear the thereby arising pains. Truth is always harsh and bitter, and no irrational and unlogical life form likes to hear it, because it is always apposite and painful and tears big wounds. In recognition and bearing of the harsh and bitter truth, however, it can be said that many good earth human beings have already racked their brains in order to find a solution for your humankind. They presented their cognitions, even if they were not always especially useful and purposeful. Consequently, even evil irrational teachings of older and younger origin could continue to proliferate maliciously. But nevertheless, they taught that all old things of material forms break, of which millions of your present humankind are also aware, even if they are not able to comprehend it in the truth. On your material world, there is never a going back, as this is also not possible on other worlds and in other spheres. Therefore, only the one way remains for you, earth human being, to go, namely, in the first place, to break through and to overcome all limitations existing within yourselves, in order to then loosen yourselves internally from all those worldly things which embody evil unvalues for the consciousness-based evolution, and thereby hold back the consciousness development. The cognition from countless thousand millions of years proves that when the human being inwardly loosens themselves from the passing things, no loss of any kind can still ever harm him or her. The secret of this loosening and binding is valid for the earth human beings of the present time most especially. What binds the earth human being in a worldly and material manner also binds them spiritually. But what unbinds the earth human being in a worldly and material manner, that will be given to them in thousandfold number and form in the spiritual. This step which is required of you earth human beings will place some, indeed even very many, before a very difficult decision, because the human being is generally of the sense that one can, nevertheless, live quite reasonably on the earth, if one does not care for spiritual things, and if one can draw from the great fullness of earthly treasures with strong hands. And letting go of what the earth human being has acquired with their own powers or obtained from inherited rights requires more than just a good, quote, will. This letting go requires an enormous inner greatness and an immense recognition and acknowledging of the creational truth, which unfortunately is so very lacking to the greatest extent in the present-day human beings of your earth. But no way can be trodden without effort, and no school can teach without teaching material. Tempests of peoples, illnesses and plagues, expropriations, catastrophes, and devaluations of money, etc., had to inevitably come upon the earth human beings because they are teaching material of the school of life. Because the earth human beings do not, out of voluntary decision, part with what they have once achieved, whether rightly or unrightly, a teaching aid had to inevitably come upon them which they could not simply escape from. But as hard and relentless as the teachings have come upon them, they bounce off them uselessly. A few of them thought better, while the great masses, however, did not care more about everything and continued to vegetate in the murky pool of the self-damnation and still do the same in the present time. The developmental course of the earthly humankind has, within the framework of the evolution, reached a point where it should be raised upwards to a higher consciousness-based state. This according to an evolution-conditioned plan of the creation which demands the consciousness-based and spiritual progress of your life form. This progress, however, means, for the earth human being, a farewell to the old and often errant. That which has overlived, or in the sense of, quote, is out of date, must be triumphed over, and whoever rebels against the, quote, spirit of the new time, and even frowns upon it, excludes themselves from any true progress and walls up the way of the evolution for themselves and others. In their unintellect, such a human being forces him or herself into an enslaving religion, into that which is backward, yesterday, persisting, remaining behind, and back-binding. Thereby he or she is not able to comprehend and to analyze the scope of the question that hence arises, namely, what then happens to all those who are not able to keep up with the progressive evolution of the new time? The uncomprehending ones are not able to grasp the fact that by binding themselves back and remaining behind, they cause damage to the entire humankind, because through their thinking, living, and deeds, they mislead their fellow human beings to the old and thus to irrational teachings when the evolution is observed and considered from the vantage point of the spiritual and consciousness-based. The effort of binding oneself back destroys all progress towards the new and true because it does not evolve, but rather it wraps itself deeper and deeper into an inextricable confusion. The rationality-based logic of all laws and recommendations of the creation, however, demands that it is the absolute obligation of the earth human being to prepare him or herself for all that is to come and all that is new, in order to fill the decisive place in the course of the evolution and to keep the machinery in motion. If the human being, however, disregards this absolute obligation, then he or she acts as a disturbing factor which is hindering or even causes short circuits. If a technical machine is used as an allegory, then the following results. If a defective gear wheel is found in the gearbox of a machine, then it will only work falteringly and faultily. If the gear wheel is not removed and replaced by a new one or simply repaired, then it will lead, in inevitable consequence, to the destruction of the machine. If the defective gear wheel is, however, replaced by an old and worn-out wheel, it will lead, in inevitable consequence, to the damage and to the destruction. For a short while it may well be able to hold and do its service, but however, damage and destruction will be unavoidable. But this is also the case in the life of the human being, and in the unavoidable sequence of the evolution. If the human being lingers in the old and irrational teachings, then he or she thereby impedes the course of the evolution. If they do not replace that which is old and unreal with that which is new and valuable, then they destroy themselves in their back-boundedness. Many earth human beings believe in miracles, and thus also in the fact that they are automatically included in the machinery of the evolution without they themselves having to strive for this inclusion. In their irrational belief of religious forms, they assume that a God would direct all their fates, and thus also the evolution. Thereby, they live in the idea that the spiritual and consciousness-based evolution can be unavoidable if they just submissively put all fate, etc., into the hands of their God. But what an evil, irrational belief the earth human being has fallen prey to herein, for nowhere exists a God of this form who could lead and direct the fate of the earth human being from its power. All efforts lie with the human being him or herself, so therefore also the effort for the evolution in every respect. This must be clear to every earth human being, and he or she must never rely on any miracles, for they are unreal. Never before have there been miracles in the depths of the unending duration, and they will never exist.